When you look at the conflict in the Middle East, it feels like a really modern problem, right? But what if the real story, the deep roots of it all, go back thousands of years? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into how some ancient biblical narratives might just hold the key to understanding today's headlines.
And that quote right there, it really nails it. The sources we're diving into suggest that if you really want to understand the tension between, say, Israel and Iran, you can't just start with 20th century politics. You have to go way, way back to stories of family drama and prophecies from a different age.
So to really get a grip on what's happening now, we have to travel back in time. We're talking nearly 4,000 years, and it all starts not with armies or borders, but with one man, the patriarch Abraham, and two family feuds that would, kind of unbelievably, set the stage for history. Okay, so here's the first major split. Isaac was the miracle baby, the one God promised to a very old Abraham and Sarah. But, well, they got impatient. And that impatience led Abraham to have a son, Ishmael, with Sarah's Egyptian servant, Hagar. And according to one source, this single decision, this moment of doubt, is the origin of what it calls the agony of the world's most troubled hotspot. The tension between these two brothers just got worse, especially when Ishmael started mocking Isaac, which led to a family breakup with consequences that have literally echoed for millennia.
And believe it or not, the very next generation, things get even more intense with Isaac's sons, Jacob and Esau. This was more than just kids fighting. It was a total clash of what they valued. Jacob, this quiet guy, he desperately wanted the spiritual birthright, that special promise from God. But Esau, the tough hunter, he couldn't have cared less. In fact, he famously sold his entire spiritual inheritance for a single bowl of stew. And that one moment is presented as this massive turning point, laying the foundation for centuries of conflict between their descendants, the Israelites and the Edomites.
And wow, this verse really hammers home just how serious that choice was. The New Testament does not mince words here. That word, profane, it literally means someone outside the temple. It's describing a person who has zero interest in spiritual things. According to the sources, it was this casual disregard for his heritage that lit the fuse for a deep, lasting hatred that became part of the very identity of the nation he started.
All right, so the story zooms out now. We're moving from family arguments to the high stakes of imperial politics. We jump forward in time to ancient Persia, which, is modern-day Iran, where the threat against the Jewish people is about to become an empire-level problem.
This timeline is so important to understand. You see, when King Cyrus of Persia let the Jews go home after the Babylonian exile, not everybody packed their bags. A pretty large Jewish community stayed right there in Persia, and they were actually doing quite well. It's this group of people that becomes the focus of the Book of Esther, and a terrifying plot to wipe them off the face of the earth.
And this is where this man, Haman, enters the picture. He's the villain of the story. One source refers to him, and this is chilling, as the Adolf Hitler of the Old Testament. Think about that. His plan wasn't just to conquer or enslave, it was total annihilation. He got the king to sign an official empire-wide decree to kill every single Jewish man, woman, and child, all on one day.
So, how in the world could a plot like that be stopped? Well, the sources say the answer lies in this ancient promise made to Abraham centuries before. From this biblical viewpoint, Haman's evil plan put him on a collision course with God's own covenant, and his end? Hanged on the very gallows he built for his enemy, which is seen as a direct, almost poetic fulfillment of that ancient curse.
Esther's plan to stop him was just brilliant, a mix of incredible bravery and clever strategy. You can feel the tension building through these 4 steps. First, she risks her life just by showing up in front of the king without an invitation. Then, this dramatic reveal at a second banquet, where she exposes Haman and saves her people. A day that was meant for genocide was turned into a day of deliverance, which is still celebrated today as the Festival of Purim.
So, up to this point, we've basically been looking at historical events through a biblical lens. But here's where things take a turn. The sources we're looking at argue that these ancient texts aren't just history books. They're presented as a kind of prophetic blueprint for the future, a blueprint that they claim keeps coming true with stunning accuracy.
I mean, take the empire of Babylon. When it was the absolute superpower of the world, the prophet Isaiah made this ridiculously specific prediction. He didn't just say it would be conquered. He said it would be so completely wiped out that no one would ever live there again. And he said this centuries before it happened.
And check this out. The sources claim every single detail came true. The Medes conquered it, the city is now just ruins. But the craziest proof they point to is modern.
In the 20th century, Saddam Hussein poured millions of dollars into rebuilding Babylon. He was literally stamping his own name on the bricks, but the project completely failed. The prophecy, they argue, just wouldn't be broken.
But maybe the most jaw-dropping prophecy is about Israel itself. After their nation was destroyed, the Jewish people were scattered all over the world for centuries. But the prophet Ezekiel had this vision, a valley of dry bones that miraculously come back to life. It was a prophecy of a national resurrection, the Jewish people returning from everywhere to their ancient homeland. For almost 2,000 years, that prophecy probably looked like an impossible dream. Then came this year. The sources point to the creation of the modern state of Israel in 1948 as the stunning, literal fulfillment of Ezekiel's vision. A nation that was for all intents and purposes dead was suddenly brought back to life on the world stage.
Okay, so let's try to connect the dots here. We've talked about family feuds from 4,000 years ago, assassination plots in ancient Persia, and these wild prophecies of nations dying and being reborn. What does any of this have to do with the world we see on the news every single day?
Well, the sources point to this really fascinating tension inside the Bible's prophecies. You have Isaiah talking about this amazing future age of peace where weapons are turned into farming tools, but then you have the prophet Joel saying the exact opposite: turn your farming tools into weapons. The argument is that these aren't contradictions. They're describing two different eras. And right now, we're living in the age of Joel, an age of conflict that they say will eventually lead to that prophesied age of peace.
So in the end, this whole journey through these sources suggests that the Bible isn't just a history book. It's presented as a continuous story that shapes our present and our future. It implies that the conflicts, the nations, and the drama we see playing out today are all part of a narrative that was written down a long, long time ago. And that leaves us with one heck of a question to think about. If it's all one long story, what chapter are we living in right now?